We discussed that development economics basically tries to uncover the processes that leads to differences in equilibrium state for different individuals, households, communities, etc. So the idea is to first understand and uncover the differences. So we really are interested in knowing what could be the possible factors that have affected these two lives so differently. Differences. And then once we know that these are the factors, once we make a list of factors, then we try and find ways to influence their trajectory such that they don't have such huge differences amongst themselves. So as I told you, that different kinds of policies that are introduced to make sure that there are lesser inequalities, or to make sure that every community in terms of maybe gender, in terms of regional disparities, we try and build these kind of policies to make sure that everybody has equitable access to the resources and everybody lives an equal life. And the background of these policies comes from this first step. Uh, the foundation of these policies have to come from the reasons that make their lives so differently apart. So it is important, this step of uncovering the processes that has led to such differences is important to analyze, is important to identify. So that is the topic for today's class, that we are going to talk about the factors, talk about the reasons that has led to the differences in these two lives. Okay. Again, I mean, the same things, we've already discussed this. So let's move ahead and talk about how do we actually. So okay, so we've just said that we know. We the first step is to analyze, is to list down the reasons, list down the factors that have probably led to the differences in their lives. Now, but as a development economist, how do you actually model these differences? So suppose you know that maybe population is a factor. So maybe one economy has a higher population as compared to the other economy, and maybe that's the reason why the kind of economic resources they have is lesser relatively compared to the other economy. The per capita availability of resources is lesser because the population in one economy is way higher than the population in the other economy. But and then you also know that there is a problem of health. So you do not have good health conditions in one economy and the other economy has better health conditions. Then you also realize that literacy is a problem. One economy is highly educated and there's enough infrastructure in the economy such that people have good access to schools, good access to higher education, and hence the economy is highly educated, while the other economy is has a poor access to education and people are not educated, the literacy level is lesser. So you hypothetically just imagine that you've identified these three factors, but how do you actually model these differences? How do you capture the exact impact of these differences on the level of differences that these economies have faced? So you all are, I mean, I'm sure you would have seen this kind of a basic model, basic econometric model in your econometrics course, where we are considering this y variable, which is a dependent variable, to be the GDP. For now, we are believing that GDP is a representation of growth for these two economies. So if suppose GDP for one economy is greater than the GDP for the other economy, then we assume that the one which has a higher GDP is more developed as compared to the one which has a lesser GDP level. But eventually later in this lecture you will realize that we will also discuss that what exactly is a good indicator for growth, what is a good indicator for development, when we try and compare to economies or when we try and compare to communities. What are those things that will tell you that this is a better developed society as compared to the other society? But for now, to make things simpler, we are just keeping our growth indicator as GDP. Then on the right hand side, you have all the factors. So the factors that you feel make these two lives so different from each other, you have listed those factors down, and then in econometrics what you try to do is to model these differences in terms of an econometric model, and then understand which factor is the most important factor. So you know that the one which has a significant coefficient. So beta 1, beta 2, beta 3 are basically the three coefficients here, and the one which has a higher value, and also depending on what sign that value has, what sign, if it is a positive sign or a negative sign, you interpret the impact in relation to that sign that you get from in the coefficient value. So depending on the sign of the coefficient value, the significance of the coefficient value, and the actual value of the coefficient, you will be able to make a judgment on which factor is the most important factor and how much percentage change is being identified in this growth indicator with a unit change in this factor. So it is important to model the differences in these two societies to be able to identify a proper mechanism. The idea ultimately is to make sure that everybody is reaching a higher level of GDP as before. So you have to first identify that what is it that impacts GDP. What is the fact? What are the factors that impacts GDP? Once you've realized the factors, once you've identified the factors, the next is to understand and make a priority list amongst these factors, and then try and find ways to influence these factors. So suppose from the result, hypothetically, suppose it comes out that X3, which is literacy, is the most important factor. It has the highest coefficient and it has a positive sign. So if literacy increases, then you have a positive significant impact on the GDP level. So then the policy maker would want to identify policies which will make sure that the economies are educated, that the literacy level in these economies is high enough. Now, it sounds very simple. I mean, if we just have to form a model and then identify the factors and then, I mean, just make a priority list based on the coefficient values, but it is not usually that simple. I have just placed a very simple linear model here, but when you actually work with the data, with the actual data, it isn't that simple. So, I mean, and also you would notice if you have read, I mean, some amount of academic work, good academic work, then you would know that even for a single topic, even for a single relation, you would find so many different models. You would find so many different papers talking about different things. They have their own different hypotheses, and every paper tends to have different results. So there will be a set of paper who would say that yes, population impacts GDP positively. Then there will be some set of papers that would say that no, population impacts GDP negatively. So there are two kinds of theories mostly in every domain. So you would have a theory supporting population, you would have a theory going against population. So population again has two sides. One would, if you have a higher population, then you can imagine your economy to have more social capital if the population is well fed. And by well fed, I don't mean that they are, they have enough food to eat. By well fed, I mean that they are properly, how would I put it, properly tailored in a way that they can contribute to the society. So they are well educated, they have, their exposure to the world is high enough that they can think of new ideas. So if you have higher population, then there will be newer ideas in the economy that will further contribute to the growth in an economy. On the other hand, so this is one theory, this is one group of economists who believe that higher population can actually contribute to higher growth. But then there is another set of people who would say that no, higher population would mean more hands for a small pie of food. So there will be more people who are dependent on the economy, and the resources are lesser. So the per capita availability would be lesser. So then higher population can actually hamper the per capita growth, per capita GDP. So again, as I said, that there are two sides to each of these factors. As good economists, as good statisticians, the idea is to form a good model. And by good model, it a lot of times you would also see that a lot of models have so many variables. It's such a huge model. So right now I've just placed three factors here, but when you try and build an econometric model, you will place so many variables. I mean, I'm sure you can't really justify the changes in GDP by these three factors. So you would have many more factors. But the art of good modeling is not to place too many factors, because then you are just losing out on the importance of each of these variables. So the art of good modeling is to capture maximum variability in this GDP with as few factors as possible. So basically the idea is that you have to identify the most important factors. Suppose you have some variable x4 which explains only a part of GDP, but you have missed out on some x5 which explains a huge part of GDP. So a good model would basically represent lesser number of variables, and by lesser number of independent variables, and by lesser I don't mean 3 or 4, but yeah, relatively lesser number of variables, but those number of variables explaining a majority part of the GDP. So you are keeping very few things in this error which are possibly unobserved, or something which you couldn't have captured numerically. So the idea of a good model is to make sure that you are capturing maximum variability with the most important factors in the model. Right. We don't really talk about these factors so often when we discuss differences in growth of developing and developed economies, but it's interesting that you have mentioned some of these points here. So let's just look at these points and then try and compare your answers with the list of topics, list of factors that are mentioned in your text. Okay, so this is the summary of what is mentioned in your text, if you see the slide on the screen, and these are your answers. So let's just first briefly discuss your answers, and then I will move to that list. Okay, so a lot of you, there are so many repeated answers, which is very likely to happen, because some of these factors such as health, education, availability of resources, these are factors which will definitely impact growth and can definitely explain the differences in the lives that these children are living. One point that I've highlighted here is ease of formal financing, banking and insurance. Definitely this is an important factor, that if the financial infrastructure of an economy is strong enough, then we can expect such differences, because in the lives of these two children you observe that one do not have access to good, I mean, one doesn't have access to any kind of financial instruments, any kind of formal financial instruments, and hence is investing money in an informal setup, whereas the other one is has access to such instruments and is making investments there. So that also impacts the growth. I mean, that is an explanatory factor for the differences in the lives of these two children. Then some of these factors are again family size, number of people in the family, and number of dependent people, number of earning members. These are all related to population, so I wouldn't really consider them as two different multiple different factors. They are all coming under the category of population, which again, population does play an important role in explaining the growth of a country. And then ease of, just get rid of this. Family planning, again, related to population. So family planning, that just strikes me to explain that family planning policies are actually introduced in a lot of economies. You would notice that happening in China very strictly. Even in India, it happened long back, 20-30 years back. It happened very strictly during the regime of Indira Gandhi, when she had tried to impose a restriction on the number of children that you can have in a family. And that's actually a solution. That's the second step. To this process. The slide where we discuss that development economics follows the trajectory of first identifying the reasons and then finding the ways to influence these processes. So family planning policies are actually a solution, are actually a policy prescription to sort of lower down the population of an economy. If population is the reason that people might have identified to be explaining the differences in the growth of economies, and then family planning policies are actually a solution or policy prescriptions to counter that. Nutrition indicators, yes, it is important. Specifically, early child nutrition values are very important for later development of children. And I think I've also mentioned this topic in the list of topics for your project. And nutrition does actually play an important role for building the human capital of an economy. Food prices, I won't really get into prices so much here. Health index, yes, that's true. Literacy. Okay, this is actually a very interesting point, and I think someone else has also written geography, geographical differences. So yes, definitely. Definitely there are some things that you can fix. So by identifying that one economy is highly educated and the other isn't highly educated, and maybe that's the reason why they are not on the same platform in terms of their growth or in terms of GDP. So there can be some things that can be probably fixed by policy prescriptions, but there are certain things that you cannot really fix, and that is the economic history of a particular region, of a particular area that has led to the current situation. So we know that in the past there were few major powers in the world economy, and then the rest of the other economies were actually colonized by them. So there has been some kind of economic background also to the present scenario of these economies, and that's something you can't really change about. You cannot really introduce a policy, or you cannot really introduce a way to fix such differences. So that's actually a very interesting point that has been mentioned by Japji here. That the economic history of places are very different, and that's something that cannot really be, at least I can't really think of a way which can probably change that. Also, someone has mentioned geography, which again is an important factor, that geographically some countries are placed in areas where naturally there are so many resources, and then there are certain economies which are placed in a certain geographical area where they do not have access to these resources. Or maybe some countries are placed in areas where they are prone to certain diseases, where on the other hand some countries are in a geographical setup where they enjoy a better healthy life, and that's not because of some kind of man-made issue. That's just the natural factors that has led to those differences. So you can't really control for these, you can't really change these factors. These are some factors which couldn't really be changed by any human intervention. Also, if you talk about trade possibilities, there are certain countries which are landlocked. and they cannot really, I mean, that creates a problem in terms of trading with different countries. So I mean, these are several factors which are possibly natural factors, and we should also consider them when we talk about differences across different economies. Then social culture, yes, that I would say also plays an important role in explaining the differences in the kinds of lives these two girls are living. One is in a nuclear sort of setup, and the other one has a different kinship relationship where each individual is surrounded by other relatives, and financially also they are dependent on each other. And we had also discussed how to use water and electricity. They had to, I mean, that was a collective good. They were using it as collectively. So that also determines the standard of living of these two different girls. So that's also a different and an important point to consider. Okay, capital formation, technological development definitely plays a huge role in explaining the differences. Um, then ease of doing business, yes, that's again a very important point, which comes under the topic of institutions. So we will actually look at a video in today's class where they talk about institutions um, in depth, that how institutions of a particular economy contribute significantly to where they stand in terms of its growth. So definitely, I mean, if a certain economy has better institutions, better laws, um, then definitely that economy will tend to grow at a faster rate. So that is again interesting. Um, Basic facilities, water and electricity supply, type of country they were living in, again related to the same points as I just mentioned. Number of family members, all related to population, financial assets. So all of you have actually mentioned good points, and I think there is one thing that is, yeah, so amount of rainfall for agriculture activities, again geographical factors, social structure someone has already mentioned, sanitation and hygiene. I just saw someone also mentioning hygiene. Yeah, so these are also very important factors to consider when we talk about growth differences in economies, because hygiene and sanitation and clean water and all of these factors are actually important in explaining health of any economy. So they affect the nutritional values, they affect the health of the citizens. So definitely these factors are also important in explaining the differences of the in explaining the economic differences. Right. So I think you guys have done a great job, and you, as a class collectively, you have actually covered all the points, mostly all the points which are mentioned here in your text. So let's just compare these points now. So accumulation of physical capital is the, which is very obvious that if an economy has more physical capital, more tools, more machinery, then that economy will tend to grow at a faster rate. Then education, which is being mentioned by a lot of you. So if people are educated, people are literate, then we can expect them to grow into good professionals and then further contribute to the betterment of the society. Maybe they will end up, I mean, they'll contribute to the research and development of a nation. They'll come up with newer ideas, newer technologies. So definitely education plays an important role. And actually, I mean, it's interesting to see that these different factors are actually correlated. So there's also a theory in a lot of academic paper that as education increases, as people become more literate, their family size tends to reduce. So education also has an impact on population of an economy. So it's not that these factors are mutually exclusive. These factors are actually quite interlinked and quite correlated, because if suppose an economy becomes more literate, more number of people are educated, then it is seen that more education actually results into lower family sizes, and lower family sizes again it reciprocates into lesser population growth, and hence into um, higher GDP. So we shouldn't just read these factors independently. We should analyze these factors as in as I mean as quite dependent on each other. Gender inequalities could is something I think that nobody mentioned in their list, but gender inequalities also play a huge role in explaining the differences. So more developed economies tend to have more equal distribution of resources and roles in across different genders, whereas lesser developed economies tend to have more gender health. Another important factor, if your economy is not healthy, then definitely it adds a constraint on your resources, and also it withdraws some amount of the population that could contribute to the society. So if the health has to be maintained, I mean health is an important factor, and health and education together guides the human capital of a nation. So if an economy is well educated, well fed, well healthy enough, then it is human capital is a very important factor in determining an economy's economic performance. Then clean water and good hygiene, as few of you mentioned, that sanitation, good hygiene, these factors have been found to have impacted the nutritional indicators significantly, and nutritional indicators further have impacted the cognitive capabilities of children. So early child nutritional values and early child nutritional status of children have impacted their later lives. So a child who's highly nourished in his infancy is found to be in a much better place in his later life. So when a child becomes a child of any economy is a productive asset. So if a child is healthy in an economy, and then when a child becomes a youth, and in that period when he is ready to contribute to the economy, and if he is healthy and if he is educated and his cognition is well maintained, then you can definitely expect that he'll contribute a lot to the society. So these factors, clean water and good hygiene, they do play an important role in the long run by impacting a child's life positively. So that is a very important factor to be kept in mind. Ideas and education again are highly correlated, that any economy which is working on building newer ideas, and newer ideas of not just building new products but also building producing the old products in with a new technology. So increasing your productivity by using processes which will probably take lesser time. So it has happened, if you compare your economy in the last 60 years, you would notice that a lot of things have changed, and that has only come through different ideas. So these days you will see so many new things happening on the front of technology, that something that was produced maybe taking 2 days now can be produced in probably in a minute, using newer technologies. So ideas doesn't just contribute in making new products, but they also help in creating the old same products with newer technology, with higher productivity, with higher efficiency. Population growth, we have already talked enough about population growth. And population growth is actually, it's not just because of net reproduction. but also because of net immigration and age distribution. So it also, the demography of an economy also plays an important role. Where exactly, which age group is your economy in, and that also plays an important role in determining how is your population pacing up. Also, net immigration, how many people are entering into your economy, who are not really the residents of your economy, but they are in your economy and they are creating, I mean, they are one of the hands who are asking for the resources from the economy. So that also plays an important role. And actually population, I don't know if you've read this in Indian economy. So you do have this different stages of demographic transition, where you see that initially when an economy is in a low income group, is in a low income category, then just a sec. Yeah, so when an economy is in this phase, you usually notice the birth rate. So this lighter graph is of you usually notice the birth rate and death rate to be higher in the first stage, and then with improvements in medicine, with improvements in health infrastructure, you witness that the death rate starts to fall, but the birth rate takes some time to adjust to the declining death rate. So I'm sure you know why with an increasing death rate you see an increasing birth rate, because people, specifically people who expect their child to contribute to the family income. A lot of people in rural areas have more children because they believe that more children will mean more income for the family. So people who have these kinds of mindsets, they will want to have, they will produce more children if they believe that the death rate is higher. So if they expect the child mortality to be higher, then they will plan on having more children. So a higher death rate in an economy, which is actually a consequence of the health situation. So as I said that these factors are highly related. We just saw that how education is correlated with population. Now if you try and understand this, health is also related to population. So if in an economy the health conditions are poor, which is leading to higher child mortality rate, then higher child mortality rate further will actually lead to more children, because people, families who think children to be a source of income, then if they believe that their child is not going to live more than a certain year of their life, then they will plan on having more children at the first place. So higher death rate, which is a possible consequence of poor health infrastructure, will lead to more birth rate. So that is what's happening in this first stage. Then as death rate falls, it should lead to a lower birth rate, because now people know that their children are going to live a longer life, and definitely having more children is also a burden to the family income. So they also would plan it in a fashion that suppose they expect their child, the probability of a child not living for more than a certain year of their life is higher, then they would plan on having more children. But say the probability is very less, the probability of a child not living for more than a certain year of their life is very less, then they wouldn't want to add more children, more burden to their family income. So then the birth rate should actually fall. But it takes some time for people to get adjusted to the falling death rate, and hence it doesn't happen immediately. It takes its own lag. So the fall in birth rate comes with a lag, and you notice that in this stage, this is the stage of expansion, because the death rate starts to fall. Number of people dying is falling, but number of people taking birth is still high. So that leads to more population, more people in the society. Now eventually when people start realizing that the death rate is falling, the birth rate also starts to fall, and as the birth rate starts to fall, you see that slowly the population also starts falling. Now there are actually certain, so this has to be maintained in a balance, because now there are also certain economies which are in this phase, which is also not a very healthy phase to be in. Now this is a phase where you see the birth rate is actually lesser than the death rate. So people are not taking birth, but there are so many people who are dying. So that's actually leading to a shrink in their population. So Germany is one example, Japan is another example, and you would be surprised to know that in Japan there's such a problem of lesser population, that they are that they have their demography is such that they have more old people and very less number of people who are in the earlier ages of their life. Now, what that has led to is also a problem, because now there are so many old people who are not being taken care of. Now, what Japan is doing is Japan is building on technologies. So they have made robots which take care of these old people. There are so many automated technologies there in Japan that has been created, that has been built to counter this problem of decrease in population. That's also not a very healthy phase to be in. So population has to be maintained in a way that it is definitely not a burden to your society, but also that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have more number of people dying vis-a-vis number of people taking birth. So yeah, that's the present situation of some economies as well, this stage where the population is declining, and how they are dealing with this declining population is again an interesting aspect to look at. Okay, yeah, so coming back to the reasons, so population geography again is important, as some of you also mentioned that mostly the developed economies are in temperate zones. If you look at the geography of the developed economies today, they are in temperate zones, whereas the ones who are not developed, who are developing, are in tropics, are in tropical zones, which are definitely more prone to diseases as compared to temperate zones. And but they are also great sources of resources. So economies which are in tropics are a great source of resources. But the issue here is that again economic history comes into play. So developed economies who do not have access to good resources have actually taken out these resources from developing economies through the way of trade. So they have, and right now, I mean, in the present scenario, we follow the method of trade, but earlier, back in the history, as I just mentioned few minutes back, that these developing economies were actually colonies of developed economies. So some of these natural resources which were only found in developing economies were actually taken to the developed economies back in that time as part of their colonies. So they in the position of colonies, they were supposed to supply some natural resources to these economies. So the developed economies have actually are actually enjoying the present scenario, and some credit also goes to the kind of history that they have witnessed. Now, total factor productivity or technological progress. This is something that is the left out. So anything that, so after accounting for all these factors that we've just looked at, anything that's left in the total growth percentage is actually explained by this factor, which is the total factor productivity or technological progress. And which is also very evident that technological progress does play an important role in building up the economic performance. The last but not the least is a very important factor that explains the differences, is the role of institutions. Now, what exactly are institutions? Some of you mentioned ease of doing business. Some of you mentioned access to financial institutions. This actually comes under this broad category of institutions. This is also called as social capital or social infrastructure. Now, these are institutions um, which are some kind of laws that govern collective undertakings. These are arrangements that govern collective undertakings. Now, also the extent of the role played by institutions in explaining growth of an economy is is two way. One, that you should have good institutions, you should have good laws that will make the environment productive for the economy, good productive laws. And then the second part of this process is that people should actually follow the institutions, should follow the law. So it is a two-way process, but it does play a very important role. You will notice that a lot of economies which are developing or underdeveloped have a huge impact of bureaucracy or a huge impact of corruption, a huge impact. You will know that in even in the Indian economy, there's a huge part of the economy which is black, which is called as the black economy, and that has got to do with this factor. All of these reasons, all of the corruption and bureaucracy that we see in these underdeveloped economies is because of the poor functioning of the institutions in these economies. And institutions actually does play a very important role in actually explaining how these economies are on such different levels and on such different trajectories. So yes, I mean, these are the different factors that could explain the differences between not just Desta's and Becky's world, but also the different polars of our world economy, where one part of the economy is highly developed and one part of the world economy is still developing or is underdeveloped or is very poor. So these are precisely the factors, but again, this is not an exhaustive list. You can still add on a lot of other factors which would play an important role in explaining the differences. Okay, this is just a demonstration of this chart, so you can just go through this. Next is, so as we've discussed that we've talked about a lot of factors that explains that represents development, that represents growth. Now we mostly use GDP as a measuring rod for growth, but no economist would actually accept GDP as the sole factor, GDP as the only factor for growth. We've just seen how development is such a multi-dimensional aspect. It has a multi-dimensional aspect. So GDP doesn't really just is the only factor that captures growth. You need to consider a lot of other things to state that an economy is developed or not. So GDP also, it doesn't measure wealth. GDP is a flow, so, and wealth is a stock. So GDP only mentions how much is being added to your economy on an annual basis. It doesn't really measure wealth. You should also know that United Nations had introduced HDI, which is called as the Human Development Index, and we will be discussing HDI as well, and how do we calculate HDI in detail in the later parts of your course. So Human Development Index is considered as a better measure to capture development, to use as a measure of comparison across different economies rather than just GDP. So HDI actually captures GDP, life expectancy and literacy, and then it takes into account all these factors and then creates an index. And based on the value of this index, you can categorize economies as developed or underdeveloped and so on. Just to summarize, and then we can begin with a video. Just to summarize, just look at this table. It's also there in your textbook, and it tries to, on different factors, some of these factors we've already discussed in the last slide. It tries to differentiate the rich nations and the poor nations based on these factors, and you can see that actually indeed these factors are significantly different from each other across the two polars. So population in rich nations is way lesser than these nations, the poor nations. GDP also, again, is GDP per capita is also very different. Human Development Index of rich nations is higher, whereas poor nations have a lower HDI. Annual population growth is 0.8% in rich nations, whereas it's 2.4% in poor nations. So you do see Some you do see that these are actually the factors which are explaining why these nations are poor and why these nations are richer. Total fertility rate is also lesser in rich nations, whereas in poor nations is it's a lot. Adult literacy is greater than 95%, whereas it's 58% in poor nations. And then you also see gender bias here, that in rich nations the female literacy is the same as adult literacy, whereas there is a difference of 10 percentage points in female and adult literacy in poor nations. Index of government corruption or institutions, as we just discussed, is low in rich nations, whereas it's high in poor nations. Again, life expectancy is an indicator of health. Under 5 mortality is also an indicator of health. So life expectancy is higher in rich nations vis-a-vis poor nations. Under 5 mortality is very, very less in rich nations. It's 7 per 1,000 people, whereas it's 120 per 1,000 in poor nations. Rural population is only 10%, whereas it's 70% in poor nations. Agriculture's share in GDP is 5% in rich nations, whereas it's 25% in poor nations. And also this data is from World Bank. This is 2005. But if you look at the fresh data, maybe we can have a fresh perspective on the comparison. But we do get an idea that some of these factors are actually very important in guiding why these nations are richer and why these nations are poor.